The morning came cold and bitter to the mountain peaks where Elena had made her home for 3 long years. She stood at the edge of a rocky cliff, looking down at the valley below where humans had begun to settle. Her dragons, Ember and Storm, slept in the cave behind her, their breathing deep and even like the rhythm of the earth itself. Elena wrapped her dark cloak around her shoulders and felt the weight of loneliness press down on her like a heavy stone. She had been a warrior once, a proud elf who rode dragons into battle and sang songs of victory, but that was before the war, before the aliens came from the sky in their terrible metal ships, before her husband Marcus fell during the defense of the Northern Pass. His death had broken something inside her that she thought could never be fixed. So she had taken her 2 dragon companions and fled to these isolated mountains, away from the grief and the memories and the endless pain of loss. Ember woke first, as she always did. The smaller dragon stretched her wings and released a small stream of golden fire that lit up the cave with warm light. She was only half the size of Storm, but her spirit was twice as large. Ember had been born with a gift for communication and understanding. She seemed to know what Elena was feeling before Elena herself understood it. The dragon approached her rider and pressed her scaled head against Elena's chest, making a sound like a rumbling purr. Storm emerged more slowly, his massive frame blocking out the light from the cave entrance. He was older than Ember by many years, and he carried his age with dignity. His scales were a deep blue-gray color that looked almost silver in certain light. Storm had been Elena's husband's dragon once before the war took him. They had bonded over their shared grief, the dragon and the widow, each understanding the loss that the other carried. Elena climbed onto Ember's back without ceremony, a motion she had performed thousands of times. The dragon spread her wings and leaped from the cliff, catching the wind and rising higher and higher into the pale morning sky. Storm followed, his larger body moving with surprising grace. Together they flew above the clouds, and for a few moments Elena could pretend that the world below did not exist at all. But the world did exist, and it demanded her attention. As they descended toward the human settlement, Elena saw something that made her pause. There was activity near the eastern edge of the village, more than usual. People were gathering and pointing upward at the sky. Elena's heart clenched with fear and recognition. She knew that pattern of movement. She had seen it many times before during the war. The aliens were coming. She could not see their ships yet, but she could feel them. There was a vibration in the air that only those who had survived an alien attack could recognize. Elena had learned to trust her instincts over the years. She guided Ember down toward the village with more speed than caution, ignoring the danger of being seen. Storm flew beside her, his eyes sharp and alert. As they landed on the outskirts of the settlement, humans began to scatter in panic. Some ran toward their homes. Others grabbed weapons. A few brave ones stood their ground, staring at the dragons with expressions that mixed fear with desperate hope. An older man stepped forward from the crowd. He had gray hair and kind eyes that had known hardship. His name was Robert, though Elena did not know this yet. He was the leader of this village, and he had seen enough of the world to recognize that these dragons had not come to attack. They had come to warn. Robert raised his hand to quiet the frightened people. Then he spoke in a loud, clear voice that carried across the village square. He said that if the dragons had wanted to hurt them, they could have done it already. He said that these creatures must be here for a reason. He asked if anyone among them understood the language of dragons or elves. A young woman stepped forward from the crowd. Her name was Hannah, and she was the school teacher in this small village. She had studied the old languages in her youth, back when the world was less dangerous and learning was considered a precious thing. She approached Elena slowly, with her hands empty and open to show that she meant no harm. Elena could see the intelligence and courage in this woman's eyes. She made a decision in that moment. She would trust this human, at least for now, through a combination of old elf words and images that she projected into Hannah's mind. Elena communicated a simple message. The aliens were coming, and they needed to prepare. Hannah's face went pale, but she did not panic. She turned to Robert and told him what the elf woman had said. Robert nodded once sharply and immediately began giving orders. He told people to gather their most precious possessions. He told them to prepare the underground shelters that had been built long ago, before the current generation was even born. He told them to arm themselves and be ready to fight or flee. Elena dismounted from Ember and walked toward Robert. The older man did not flinch as the tall elf woman approached him. They stood facing each other for a long moment, two people who had both lost much to war and circumstance. Elena spoke in halting English, words she had learned long ago and had rarely used since her isolation began. She said, "The aliens will be here before sunset. We must move your people to safety. My dragons and I will defend the village. We have fought these creatures before. We know their tactics. We know their weaknesses. But we cannot do this alone. We will need your courage and your willingness to stand together." Robert asked one question. Why should he trust her? Why would an elf and dragons risk their lives for humans they had never met? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she told him the truth. She told him about her husband, about the war, about the grief that had nearly destroyed her. She told him that hiding in the mountains had not brought peace, only a deeper kind of darkness. She told him that when she saw this village with its people working together and building something new, she recognized something she thought she had lost forever. She recognized hope. Robert reached out and placed his hand on Elena's shoulder. He said that his wife had died years before the aliens came, and that he understood loss in ways that went deeper than words could reach. He said that he would trust her, and he would bring his people together to stand against this threat. He said that sometimes the world offered second chances to those who were brave enough to take them. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Elena worked with Robert and Hannah to organize the village. The strongest fighters were given weapons and trained in basic strategies. The young children and elderly were moved to the shelters with supplies and water. Hannah worked to convince those who were afraid that resistance was possible, that hope was not foolish. Storm flew out toward the horizon to scout for the alien ships. He returned with information that Elena understood through their bond. The aliens would arrive in approximately 6 hours. They had 3 ships, which was more than Elena had hoped for, but fewer than she had feared. They would likely attack the village directly, seeking resources and any resistance to crush quickly. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Elena stood on the highest point of the village and watched the horizon. She could feel her dragons beside her, their presence a comfort and a strength. She thought about her dead husband and wondered if he was watching from wherever spirits go. She hoped that he would understand why she had come down from the mountain. She hoped that he would be proud of her choice to fight again. Then in the distance she saw them. 3 massive metal ships moving through the sky like predators. The alien invasion had begun and Elena was no longer alone. She had found allies, purpose, and the beginning of a new reason to believe in tomorrow. She turned to Robert, who had climbed up to stand beside her. She said one word, "Ready?" He nodded and said, "Ready." The first ship released its landing sequence, and the sky itself seemed to split open with fire and light. The battle was about to begin. The first blast of energy from the alien ship hit the eastern perimeter of the village and shattered a wooden structure that had once been used for storage. The explosion was deafening, and it sent shockwaves through the ground that made even the dragons stumble. Elena raised her hand and released a wave of elf magic that created a shimmering barrier over the village center. It would not stop a direct hit from the ships, but it would slow down their energy weapons and give the people below precious seconds to take cover. Storm launched himself into the air with a roar that echoed across the mountains. His massive body moved with surprising speed and grace as he flew directly toward the nearest ship. Ember followed, her smaller frame allowing her to maneuver faster and more precisely. Elena ran down from the high point, jumping onto Ember's back just as the dragon rose again to meet the aliens in combat. The battle was nothing like the quiet years Elena had spent in the mountains. It was chaos and noise and terror all mixed together. Alien soldiers began to descend from their ships in small metal pods that fell like strange rain from the sky. They were tall creatures with elongated bodies and multiple limbs, their skin an unsettling shade of gray-green. They carried weapons that shot concentrated beams of pure energy that could burn through rock and flesh with equal ease. Hannah had led the human fighters to prepare defensive positions among the buildings. Robert stood at the center of the village, directing people to safety and keeping the defenders organized. The humans were afraid, but they were also determined. They had lived under the threat of alien invasion for years. They knew what was at stake. Ember flew so close to the first alien ship that Elena could see the strange symbols marked on its hull. She reached out with her elf magic and found the weak point in the ship's exterior shielding, a vulnerability that only centuries of elf knowledge could identify. She struck at it with a bolt of concentrated energy, and the ship lurched suddenly in the air. its balance compromised. Storm seized the opportunity and breathed a torrent of dragon fire at the damaged section. The heat was so intense that the metal began to glow and warp. The first ship spiraled downward, unable to maintain altitude. It crashed into the forest beyond the village with a sound that shook the earth for miles around. 2 ships remained. The second ship changed tactics. Instead of continuing to fire on the village directly, it began to land, deploying soldier after soldier onto the ground. Elena understood immediately what the aliens were doing. They were adapting. They were switching to ground combat because the dragons had proven too dangerous in the air. This was a serious threat. She guided Ember down to the village center and dismounted, her elf sword appearing in her hand as if summoned from thin air. The blade glowed with an inner light that was beautiful and terrible at the same time. She positioned herself between the advancing alien soldiers in the village, with Robert standing beside her. The human leader looked at the elegant elf woman beside him and realized that he was not afraid anymore. Whatever came next, they would face it together. He raised his weapon and called out to the village defenders. He told them to hold their ground and to trust in each other. He told them that they were not just fighting for their own lives, but for the future of everyone in this settlement, including the children in the shelters below. The aliens advanced in a coordinated formation, their weapons sending waves of energy toward the defenders. Elena created shields of pure magic that protected the humans, but maintaining them took effort and focus. Robert coordinated the human counterattack, with fighters using the buildings and natural landscape to their advantage. They were slower and weaker than the aliens individually, but they were smarter and more adaptable. Storm descended from the sky and began to engage the alien soldiers directly. His claws and teeth were as dangerous as any weapon, and his dragon fire turned their own technology against them, as the heat made their weapons malfunction. But there were so many of them, and even a dragon could only kill so many before exhaustion began to set in. Hannah grabbed a weapon and joined the fight herself. She had never imagined she would be a warrior, but she found that she could shoot with accuracy and courage. She watched for openings where other defenders were struggling and moved to support them. She became a leader without meaning to, simply through the example of her bravery and determination. After what felt like hours but was actually only about 30 minutes, Elena noticed something important. The third ship had stopped firing. It was lifting off the ground and beginning to retreat toward the sky. The alien commander had made a calculation and decided that this village was not worth the cost of continued invasion. They were leaving, but before the second ship could join its companion and escape, Storm flew directly at it and struck the main engine with a burst of dragonfire so intense and pure that the metal itself began to fuse and collapse. The ship's power systems overloaded, and it began to sink downward, no longer able to stay aloft. It crashed into the forest with even more violence than the first one, and this time there was no getting up. The third ship retreated into the clouds and vanished from sight. The battle was over. In the sudden silence that followed, Elena could hear the sound of her own breathing and the breathing of those around her. People emerged from their hiding places, stunned and disbelieving that they had actually survived. Some were injured, and Hannah immediately began organizing medical care using knowledge she had learned years ago. A few defenders had been killed, and their loss cast a shadow over the victory, but the village still stood. Robert approached Elena and extended his hand. She took it without hesitation. He said, "We could not have done this without you and your dragons. You saved us. You gave us back our lives." Elena looked at the elf warrior's hand holding the human leader's hand, and she understood that something fundamental had changed in the world. The barriers between different kinds of people had been broken down, not by politics or careful negotiation, but by shared survival and mutual respect earned in battle. She said, "We saved each other. That is what matters. That is what will matter in the times to come." Storm landed beside them, his massive body bearing the marks of the battle. Ember followed, making sounds of triumph and relief. The dragons had fought for something real today. They had not just been protecting their rider. They had been fighting for a community, for a village of humans who had accepted them without fear or judgment. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red, Elena stood with Robert and watched their people tend to the wounded and begin to repair the damage. She thought about the mountains and the lonely cave where she had spent 3 years hiding from her grief. She realized that she would never go back there to live. She had found something in this human village that was more valuable than peace. She had found purpose and friendship, and the knowledge that even after great loss it was still possible to build something new and meaningful with others who were brave enough to try. The days after the battle were filled with work and recovery. Elena stayed in the village, working alongside the people to repair damaged structures and help the injured heal. She taught them techniques of elf medicine that had been passed down through countless generations. Herbs from the highest mountains were brought down and prepared into medicines that reduced pain and accelerated healing. The villagers watched with amazement as wounds that should have taken weeks to recover began to close within days. Hannah spent much of her time with Elena, learning the elf language and teaching Elena more of the human tongue. The two women became close friends, bound by their shared experience of the battle and their mutual respect. Hannah told Elena stories about her life before the aliens came, about the books she had read and the dreams she had held. Elena shared memories of her husband Marcus in the elf kingdoms that had once been proud and powerful before the war tore them apart. Robert made a decision that changed everything for the village. He called a meeting of all the adults and announced that he would invite Elena and her dragons to stay permanently. He said that the threats they faced were not finished, that more aliens might come from the sky at any time. He said that the only chance they had of surviving the future was to become stronger together, to blend human courage with elf knowledge and dragon power. Some people voiced fears and doubts. They worried about depending on outsiders. They feared that by accepting Elena and her dragons they would attract more attacks. But most of the village supported Robert's proposal. The children especially were fascinated by the dragons. Within days, Storm and Ember had become the heart of the community, carrying children on their backs and accepting pieces of food from eager young hands. Elena worked with Robert and the other leaders to develop a plan for the village's defense. She taught them how to build structures that would resist energy weapons. She showed them how to position themselves for maximum protection, while maintaining the ability to counterattack. She explained the weaknesses of alien technology and how human creativity and adaptation could be used to overcome superior firepower. But Elena also told them a harder truth. She said that no defense was perfect and that more battles would come. She said that they needed to be prepared not just to defend themselves, but to do something that no human community had managed before. They needed to organize other settlements and create a network of resistance. Together, the humans and the elf and her dragons could become a force that would make the aliens think twice before attacking any settlement in this region. Robert seized on this idea with enthusiasm. He sent messengers to other nearby villages and settlements. He explained that Elena had come, bringing knowledge and the power of dragons, and that they could organize a resistance that might actually succeed in protecting the area from further alien invasion. Some settlements were skeptical, but others sent representatives to see for themselves. Within a month, 5 other villages had agreed to join in the defense network. Elena traveled to each settlement with Storm or Ember, meeting with their leaders and teaching them the basic principles of organized resistance. She was not just a warrior or a symbol. She was becoming something more important. She was becoming a bridge between humans and the ancient elf knowledge that had been nearly lost. During this time, something unexpected began to happen between Elena and Robert. They found themselves seeking each other's company outside of the formal planning meetings. They would sit together in the evening hours and talk about their lives and their losses. Robert told Elena about his wife Catherine, how she had loved to watch the sunset and how she had always believed that there was more good in the world than evil. Elena told Robert about Marcus, about how he had made her laugh even in the most terrible times of war. One night, as they sat together on the edge of the village watching the stars, Robert reached out and took Elena's hand. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Elena understood that he was offering her something precious, a connection that went beyond friendship and alliance. She squeezed his hand gently and they sat together in silence, two people who had both known great loss and who were learning to know joy again. Hannah noticed this developing bond between the elf woman and the human leader, and felt happy for them both. She believed that good people deserved happiness, regardless of the differences in their species or their backgrounds. She encouraged others in the village to be supportive and understanding, and most people listened to her advice. Ember became especially close to Elena during this period, as if the dragon understood that her rider was healing from deep wounds. The smaller dragon would often bring Elena gifts, small shiny objects or pieces of interesting rock. She would sleep near Elena at night, providing comfort and warmth. Storm was more reserved, but Elena could feel that he too was settling into this new life, that he had found purpose beyond mere survival. 3 months after the first battle, the resistance network was officially established. Elena stood before representatives from all 6 settlements and outlined a plan that was ambitious and dangerous. She proposed that they create a unified defense system with communication between villages and coordinated response to any alien attack. She suggested that they train young people from all the settlements in both human and elf combat techniques, creating a new generation of fighters who could work together seamlessly. Robert supported her proposal enthusiastically, and most of the other leaders agreed. A few were still cautious, but even they recognized that unity was their best hope for survival. Elena was elected as the military advisor and strategist for the entire network. It was a position of significant responsibility and authority. That night, after the formal meeting had concluded, Robert walked with Elena under the stars. He told her that she had changed their world, that she had given them hope when they had nearly lost it all. He said that she had become not just a defender of the villages, but a symbol of what was possible when different peoples came together. Elena looked at this good man who had shown her kindness and respect from the moment they met. She thought about how much had changed in just a few months. She had come down from her mountain expecting nothing. She had found everything. She told Robert that she was grateful for his trust and his friendship. She told him that she had thought her life was over after Marcus died, that she would spend the rest of her days alone and grieving. But now she saw that life was offering her new chapters, new possibilities, new reasons to wake up each morning with hope instead of despair. The two of them stood together under the infinite stars, and they did not need words to communicate what they both felt. They had both been broken by loss. They had both been healed by finding community and purpose, and now against all odds they had found something else. They had found each other. The winter came early and harsh that year, bringing snow to the valleys and ice to the mountain passes. But in the settlements of the resistance network, there was a feeling of purpose that warmed people despite the cold. Young fighters trained every day, learning both human and elf combat techniques. They became comfortable with the dragons, understanding that Storm and Ember were not just weapons, but allies and teachers. The dragons, in turn, seemed to enjoy the companionship and the sense that they were preparing for something important. Elena spent much of her time traveling between the settlements, observing training sessions and making adjustments to the defense strategies. She discovered that humans had unique strengths that elf warriors often lacked. Humans were creative problem solvers and could adapt quickly to unexpected situations. They were also physically strong in certain ways that surprised her. Some human fighters could throw heavy objects with accuracy that would take an elf years of training to achieve. Others had natural instincts for working together that made them formidable as a group. She began to develop new training methods that blended these human strengths with elf knowledge of magic and ancient combat techniques. The results were remarkable. Within 2 months, the resistance fighters had developed a unified fighting style that was more effective than what any single group could have created alone. They were becoming something new, a true blend of human and elf capabilities. Robert proved to be a gifted leader and strategist. He worked closely with Elena on planning and communications, often anticipating problems before they became serious issues. Together, they established relay stations between settlements so that information could be shared quickly if an alien attack occurred. They created supply caches in secret locations so that any fighting unit would have access to weapons and food, even if separated from their home villages. One night, as Elena and Robert reviewed maps and planning documents in his home, Elena noticed that he was looking at her rather than at the work in front of him. She asked what was on his mind. Robert set down his pen and took both of her hands in his. He told her that he had been thinking about the future, about what came after they had successfully defended the settlements. He asked her if she had thought about what her life might be like if the danger eventually passed. Elena had not allowed herself to think about such things. For so long, survival had consumed all her attention and energy, but now, faced with Robert's question, she admitted that she had begun to hope for a different kind of future. She said that she wanted to build something meaningful, something that would last beyond the battles. She said that she was tired of loss and grief, and that she wanted to experience joy and peace. Robert pulled her close to him and kissed her. A moment of tenderness and connection that felt like it belonged to an entirely different world from the one of wars and battles they inhabited. Elena felt tears run down her face, not tears of sorrow but of gratitude for this unexpected gift of second chances. The next day, Robert announced to the settlement that he and Elena were to be joined in partnership, the human equivalent of marriage. The news spread quickly through all the settlements of the Resistance Network. Some people who had been skeptical about Elena being among them changed their minds. If the human leader trusted her enough to share his life with her, then she must truly be worthy of trust. Hannah organized a celebration that was both joyful and solemn. It occurred on the winter solstice when the year was darkest but about to turn toward the light. People from all 6 settlements gathered, and Elena wore clothing that blended elf and human traditions. Robert wore a warrior's outfit that Hannah had helped him prepare, combining elements of both cultures. When they exchanged vows before the gathered community, it was a moment that seemed to carry significance beyond just the 2 people involved. Storm and Ember flew above the celebration, releasing streams of colored fire that lit up the sky with gold and green and blue. The dragons had been trained to do this specifically for the ceremony, and the sight was breathtakingly beautiful. It felt like a blessing from the natural world itself, a sign that this union of elf and human was right and good. That winter was also when the first serious test of the Resistance Network came. Scouts reported movement in the far mountains, signs that suggested alien activity. Elena and Robert organized a response team and led an investigation to determine if the threat was real or merely a false alarm. What they found was troubling. There was indeed alien presence in the region, but it was not an invasion force. Instead, it was a small group of aliens who seemed to be doing something else entirely. They had landed a ship in a sheltered valley and appeared to be setting up some kind of installation. Elena recognized the pattern from her years of studying alien behavior. They were establishing a forward base, a place from which they could launch attacks more easily in the coming spring. The Resistance Network faced a crucial decision. They could attack the alien base while it was still under construction, when the aliens were fewer in number and less prepared for combat, or they could wait and see if the aliens would eventually leave on their own. Robert called an emergency meeting of all the settlement leaders. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for immediate action, fearing that delay would only make the eventual conflict more dangerous. Others urged caution, pointing out that their forces, while unified and well-trained, were still small compared to what a full alien invasion force could bring. Elena listened to all the arguments carefully, and then she made a proposal. She said that she and her dragons would scout the alien base more thoroughly. They would determine exactly how many aliens were present and what kind of weapons and defenses they had. With that information, the network could make a truly informed decision rather than guessing blindly. She said that the dragons could move quietly and observe without being detected. She said she would personally lead this reconnaissance mission. Robert objected strenuously, saying that she was too valuable to risk. Elena took his hand and reminded him that this was precisely what a leader had to do sometimes. She had to be willing to face danger alongside the people she cared about. She said that she would be careful, and that Storm and Ember would protect her. She said that running away from danger had not helped her after Marcus died. Moving forward and facing threats directly had given her back her life. Robert wanted to argue further, but he understood that Elena was right. She had to make her own choices and take her own risks. He gave her his blessing, though it cost him greatly to do so. He told her that he loved her and that he trusted her, and that he would have faith that she would return safely. That night, Elena flew out on Storm into the darkness, with Ember flying close beside her. They moved silently through the winter air, heading toward the valley where the alien base was being constructed. The dragons moved with perfect precision, avoiding detection as they approached the enemy position. Elena realized that she was no longer the widow hiding in the mountains from her own pain. She was Elena, warrior and leader and beloved partner of Robert. She was part of something greater than herself. And whatever lay ahead in that alien base, whatever danger she would need to face, she was ready. The alien base was smaller than Elena had expected, but it was more sophisticated than she had hoped to find. As she observed from a high ridge with Storm and Ember crouched beside her, she could see that the aliens were constructing something that would allow them to coordinate attacks across a much wider area. It was a communications hub, a way for them to connect with ships and bases across the entire region. If the aliens completed this installation, the resistance network would face attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. They would not stand a chance. Elena counted approximately 80 alien soldiers working on the installation, along with various pieces of equipment and technology that she recognized as weapons systems. The base was defended by energy barriers similar to the ones the ships had used, but these were stationary and less mobile. Elena studied every detail carefully, storing information in her mind that she would need to report back to Robert and the other leaders. As she watched, she noticed something unexpected. One of the aliens was different from the others. It was smaller and moved with more deliberation and care. As Elena extended her magical senses, she felt something that shocked her. This alien had intelligence and consciousness that was fundamentally different from the others. It was not just a soldier. It was someone like Elena herself, someone with thought and emotion and the capacity to make choices. The alien seemed to sense her observation. It looked up directly at Elena, even though she was hidden in shadow on a high ridge. For a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Elena felt a flash of understanding pass between them, a recognition that transcended species. Then the alien turned away and continued working, as if the encounter had never happened. Storm sensed Elena's confusion and concern. The great dragon pressed against her, offering comfort and support. Ember made a questioning sound, asking silently if they should attack the base now while they had the opportunity. Elena shook her head. Something told her that immediate action was not the right choice, that there was more complexity to the situation than she had initially understood. They retreated into the darkness and flew back toward the settlements. Elena's mind was churning with questions and possibilities. When she arrived at Robert's home before dawn, she immediately told him everything she had observed, including her strange encounter with the different alien. Robert listened carefully and then made a practical suggestion. He said that they should consult with Hannah, whose knowledge of languages and different ways of thinking might prove valuable. The three of them met as the sun was rising, and Elena described the alien commander and the moment of connection she had felt. Hannah's eyes widened with understanding. She asked if Elena thought the alien might be capable of communication or negotiation. Elena said that she had sensed something in that moment that went beyond the usual alien behavior patterns. Hannah proposed something radical. She suggested that they attempt to establish contact with this different alien, to see if it was possible to communicate, to understand why the base was being built, and perhaps to find a way to prevent the conflict that seemed inevitable. Robert was skeptical. He said that trusting an alien was dangerous, that it could be a trap or a trick designed to lower their guard. But Elena found herself wanting to explore this possibility. She told Robert that her years of hiding in the mountains had taught her that fear and isolation were the real enemies. If there was any chance, however small, that communication might prevent bloodshed, then it was worth attempting. They decided to try a carefully managed approach. Elena would return to the alien base alone, but visible and with her weapons left behind to show peaceful intent. She would attempt to communicate with the alien commander through a combination of elf magic and simple sound. Robert and Hannah would monitor from a distance, ready to rescue her if the attempt turned dangerous. 2 days later, Elena stood on the ridge above the alien base in daylight. She did not hide. She let herself be seen. She could feel the alarm and confusion ripple through the alien soldiers as they noticed her presence. Some reached for weapons, but the commander that Elena had seen before raised a limb that clearly meant stop. The alien commander came toward Elena, moving slowly and deliberately. This close, Elena could see details she had missed before. The alien had markings on its body that suggested rank or experience. Its eyes were more expressive than the other aliens she had encountered, and there was something in the way it moved that suggested it was thinking, considering, perhaps weighing the risk of this meeting. Through a combination of telepathic projection and elf magic that shaped the very air around them, Elena and the alien commander began to communicate. The alien's name was Kesh, a designation that Elena's mind translated from the vibrations and patterns of alien thought. Kesh had been assigned to oversee the construction of this base, but Kesh was not happy with this assignment. Elena learned that among the aliens, there were those who believed in conquest and expansion, and there were those who questioned if this was the right path. Kesh was a questioner, someone whose thoughts had been shaped by experiences that had made them doubt the righteousness of invasion and domination. Kesh had volunteered for this remote assignment specifically to avoid participating in mass attacks on human settlements. Elena asked why the base was being built if Kesh did not support aggressive expansion. Kesh explained that if they refused to build the base, other aliens would be sent to replace them, and those others would be more ruthless and more committed to conquest. By building the base slowly and with less efficiency than was possible, Kesh and a handful of other questioning aliens were buying time. They were hoping that something would change, that some opportunity for different kind of future might present itself. Elena realized that what she was encountering was the beginning of change, the moment when even an alien empire could be challenged from within by those who questioned its fundamental assumptions. She told Kesh about the resistance network, about how humans and elves and dragons were working together to create something new and better. She asked if Kesh and other questioning aliens might be willing to imagine a different future as well. Kesh was silent for a long moment. Then it made sounds that Elena's mind interpreted as laughter, or perhaps the alien equivalent. Kesh said that proposing such a thing was dangerous and radical. But Kesh also said that danger and radicalism might be exactly what was needed to change a path that led only to endless war and suffering. Over the following weeks, Elena facilitated meetings between Robert and the other settlement leaders with Kesh and several other questioning aliens. The negotiations were delicate and often difficult. Some humans did not trust any aliens. Some aliens still believed in conquest. But slowly, carefully, a different kind of agreement began to take shape. The alien base was never completed. Instead, it became a meeting place where humans, elves, dragons, and questioning aliens gathered to discuss building something new together. The aliens agreed to stop supporting invasions in this region. In exchange, the humans and elves agreed to help these questioning aliens resist pressure from their own commanders, to provide shelter and support for any aliens who wanted to abandon the path of conquest. It was not a complete solution to the problem of alien invasion. Other ships might still come from distant stars seeking to conquer and control. But it was a beginning. It was proof that change was possible, that even across the deepest differences and widest gulfs, understanding and cooperation could be achieved. If people were brave enough to try, Elena stood with Robert and watched as Kesh worked side by side with human engineers to design a settlement that would house both humans and questioning aliens. She thought about the path that had brought her here, from a widow hiding in the mountains to a leader building bridges between worlds. She told Robert that she had learned something important through all of this. She said that grief and loss were real and valid, but that they did not have to define the rest of a person's life. She said that hope could be built even from the ashes of despair, and that love could grow in places where no one expected to find it. Robert took her hand and said that they would write stories about these days for generations to come. Stories about how elves and humans and dragons and even aliens had learned to live together. Stories about how a woman from the mountains had changed the world simply by being willing to come down and engage with others. And as the sun set over the valley, painting the sky with colors of hope and promise, Elena felt something that she had thought was lost forever. She felt at peace, not because the future was without danger or difficulty, but because she was no longer facing that future alone. She had found community, purpose, love, and the knowledge that even in the darkest times, light and healing were always possible.